Hi, it's Katrina! Number 10. Where did the Knights Templar meet? The Knights Templar had one mission: to protect the Holy Land and the European pilgrims who wished to travel there. After the First Crusade in the year 1099, Christian armies captured the great city of Jerusalem from the Muslims, but the surrounding area was still controlled by Muslims, so European Christians struggled to get to Jerusalem because it was extremely dangerous. In the year 1118, the French knight Hugues de Payens created a small military order to help the pilgrims reach the Holy Land safely. This was the beginning of the Knights Templar, who would go on to become one of the richest and most feared military groups in human history. They were also one of the most secretive groups ever. The Crusaders built underground meeting places and secret fortresses all across Europe. One of them is underneath the city of Akko in Israel, an underground fort over 3 square miles. It's just one of many hidden gathering places built by the Templars during the 12th and 13th centuries. The subterranean fortress in Akko was probably used for about 200 years, up until the Ottoman rulers took over the city. They then built their own structures directly on top of the fortress, and it was only recently that archaeologists uncovered the forgotten Templar meeting place. Perhaps one of the most impressive places relating to the Templars was Colossae Castle. This was once a major Crusader stronghold in Cyprus. It actually served as the Grand Commandery for the knights before they were all killed or exiled. You can see other structures built by the Knights Templar in many places in Europe, the Middle East, and Northern Africa, such as the Temple Church of London and the Templar Church of Veracruz in Spain. The list goes on and on. Number 9. Ancient Jericho. Jericho is mostly well known because it's mentioned in the Bible, but it's so much more than just a biblical city. Jericho, located on the West Bank, was the very first city in history to have walls. Jericho is considered one of the earliest continuously inhabited settlements in the world, occupied for the past 11,000 years since 9000 BC. Archaeologists have discovered proof of hunters from the Mesolithic era, evidence of the hunters' descendants thousands of years later, and the earliest remains of stone walls. This was the very first human settlement that put up walls to protect itself from the outside world. At least it's the first one that we have proof of. This in itself makes Jericho one of the most mystical places in the world. At a time when many people were still nomads or living in caves, Jericho was a magical city with high walls, defensive towers, and about 3,000 or so people living inside. Jericho's dark secret is just how much blood has been spilled on its grounds over the past several thousand years. Jericho is mentioned in the Bible as the very first town attacked by the Israelites. It was completely destroyed, then abandoned until around the 9th century BC. There was more fighting and more bloodshed, and the entire city was eventually moved about 1 mile to the south, then occupied by the Romans. In the days of the Crusaders, Jericho was moved once more a mile east of its original site from the Old Testament, and there, the city still stands. Number 8. Paititi, the lost city of the Inca. The city of Cusco is at the heart of the ancient Inca civilization. It's from Cusco that tourists began their pilgrimages to places like Machu Picchu, and where they descend to the South American jungle. For the last few hundred years, explorers have been coming to Cusco in search of a mysterious lost city in a land of sultry heat and exotic jungle. This place is supposedly hiding somewhere deep in the fantastic world of the Peruvian Amazon, and it's called the Lost City of Paititi. Discovering the lost city would be incredible for one main reason. It would show that the Inca lived deep in the jungle, something nobody really believed until recently. It wasn't until 1979 that explorers Nicole and Herbert Cartagena discovered the settlement of Mameria, providing the very first proof that the Inca lived in the Amazon, not only up in the Andes Mountains. How do we even know there's a lost Inca city in the jungle? The issue is, we don't. Not really. In the year 1600, Spanish missionary Andrés López wrote to the Vatican that there was a lost city in the Amazon which contained a massive quantity of gold, and it was called Paititi. It was supposedly a mythical place completely unlike all the other Inca cities high up in the mountains. Even though explorers have searched for it year after year, it still remains undiscovered. Number 7. Ancient Bagan. Ancient Bagan is the closest you can get to visiting Shangri-La here on Earth. It's one of the greatest archaeological wonders in the world, located in a place not too many people have been to. It's in Southeast Asia in Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. Bagan is hardly as popular as Angkor Wat in Cambodia, but it is even more mystical. Bagan was once the capital city of the powerful Pagan kingdom and the very first Burmese empire. It remained the capital from between the year 1044 until 1297. And now the place is nothing but a massive ruin. There are over 2,500 Buddhist monasteries, temples, and stupas left over from when the city had been one of the greatest places in all of Asia. And yet that's only a quarter of how many monuments there were at the height of the kingdom. In the 13th century, there were over 10,000 of these monuments dotting the landscape, making Bagan look like Shangri-La shining in the sunlight. To give you an idea of just how huge the archaeological site is these days, most tourists have to view it from a hot air balloon. The whole zone covers roughly 8 miles by 5 miles. Like much of the world in the 13th century, Bagan fell prey to the Mongol Empire. Invasion by the Mongols decimated the Pagan kingdom, and political upheaval lasted all the way into the 16th century. And now for number 6. But first, it's shout-out time! Big thank you to Juan Dominguez and Erica Russell for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Number 6. Mysterious Barbarian Lands. From between the years 43 and 410, all the lands north of Hadrian's Wall were considered the lands of the barbarians. For the Romans, this was a dark and secretive place filled with death, magic, and terror. They just couldn't conquer the people who lived in what is now northern Britain and Scotland. The Romans tried to take over Scotland 3 times, and each time was a failure. But they did actually stretch their territory a little beyond Hadrian's Wall, as far north as Moray Firth. The Roman fleet also sailed around Scotland to try and take them by sea, but nothing ever worked. Scotland remained one of the only places in Europe not conquered by the Romans. To this day, scholars don't know why. Were the warriors too fierce for the Romans to fight? Was the landscape too rough and strange? Or maybe it was just too expensive? Whatever the reason, Scotland remained forever the northern frontier, a land that could not be beaten even by the mighty Roman Empire. Number 5. Southern Egypt. The lands of southern Egypt are not only steeped in mystery, but they hold many secrets that we may never uncover. Way farther up the Nile, far from the pyramids and closer to its source, there is a desert land that holds some of Egypt's greatest monuments. Take Karnak, for example, the largest temple complex in all of Egypt. It's so big that you could put 10 ordinary cathedrals inside of it and still have room. It's home to the impossible Temple of Amun-Ra, huge columns covered in hieroglyphics, and a history of over 30 pharaohs. Karnak was built, destroyed, rebuilt, burned down, and rebuilt again over a period of about 1,500 years. And immediately across from Karnak, down an avenue which was once lined for miles with Sphinx statues on either side, you arrive at Luxor Temple, another place of great mystery. Luxor Temple was built in the ancient capital of Thebes in the 13th century BC and has been in almost continuous use as a place of worship ever since. It's been used so long as a place of worship, one of its biggest secrets is that Muslims tried to repurpose it and turn it into a mosque during medieval times. The structure has changed so much over the years under debris and rubble that the front door of the mosque is now located halfway up a wall. Islamic frescoes can be seen covering some portions of ancient Egyptian carvings. And if you go back even further, there are faded paintings from the early Christian era painted over the hieroglyphics. Number 4. The Galdra Bók of Iceland. The Galdra Bók is an ancient book of magic from Iceland. It's actually one of the most important documents from Iceland's medieval era and gives a glimpse into a faraway land where occult practices were the norm. When the Galdra Bók was written, Iceland was going through a reformation, and at the time, the entire nation was caught up in magical traditions. According to Stephen Flowers, who translated the book to English in 1989, there are a lot of really important details inside the manuscript. He says it's the only archaic book that goes into specifics about Germanic gods, magical practices, and cosmology and astrology. Iceland was wildly different from the rest of Europe, probably because they were on an island. As Christianity spread and everyone started being ruled by the Catholic Church, they were able to maintain their traditions for much longer. They were proud of their Nordic roots and were significantly more difficult to manage than the rest of Europe. Plus, they lived in a land supposedly populated by fairies and other creatures, where volcanoes frequently went off and filled the sky with fire. The Galdrabok goes into detail about intentional spells, magically motivated spells, protective formulas, spells for bringing good fortune, and aggressive forms of magic that could hurt people, and everything else you could think of. Number 3. The Duk-Duk. The Duk-Duk is a secret society from a faraway land. They are a subset of people from the traditional culture of the Tolai in the area of New Britain. They live on the largest island in the Bismarck archipelago off the coast of the island of New Guinea. Just like the ancient Icelandic people, the Duk-Duk live in a world of magic. Their magic is quite a bit different. Only men can be part of the Duk-Duk society, which is very respectable and secretive to the rest of the Tolai. They work with spirits, perform ritual dances, and cannot be looked upon by women or children. They can really only look at each other, and the men of the tribes can watch their performances. They typically wear masks to invoke either the male spirit or the female spirit, along with huge capes of bushy leaves. The rituals were so secret and their festivals so closely guarded that up until recently, supposedly strangers were only allowed to watch if they agreed to be killed after, and the Duk-Duk only appear on the full moon. For centuries, they were considered to be the wielders of justice. They were involved in all tribal matters and were the ones who would often execute people. They would carry out punishments while dressed in their traditional masks and capes, burning people's houses down, and sometimes even massacring them. Now, in the 21st century, the Duk-Duk of New Guinea have all but faded away. They still do the dances, but mostly as a tourist attraction and to keep at least some of their traditions alive. Number 2. Fairies in Ireland. Outside the major cities and large towns, Ireland is still a land of folklore and mysticism. In fact, there are still 5 ancient places in Ireland where you can supposedly spot fairies or pixies moving from one realm to another. In Irish lore, the fairies were also known as little people who lived in the forest underground or in a parallel world. Fairies rarely allow themselves to be seen by regular people, but often cause mischief. Your luck and health could be directly affected by fairies, so you didn't want to make them angry. Of course, local myths are not quite as prevalent in society as they used to be, but Irish folklore is still a big part of the culture. Take Greenan of Alliach, for example, a preserved ring fort or a fairy fort in Donegal. There were once about 60,000 such ring forts, but very few remain now, and even less remain still standing. This one dates back to at least 2,000 years ago. It was used by the O'Neill clan from between the 5th and 12th centuries, and is now known as a hotspot for supernatural occurrences. People still come to this ancient fort to commune with the fairies. Number 1. Secret Society in Pompeii. Just shy of 2,000 years ago, Pompeii must have been a truly strange and mysterious place to behold. After Mount Vesuvius erupted in the year 79 and Pompeii was covered in ash, it would have been a no-go zone for centuries. People would have been scared to get near Pompeii, as it would have been a dead place with the humans who once lived there transformed into statues, as if they'd gotten into a staring contest with Medusa. But before Pompeii became the most haunted place in Europe, it was a totally normal city. Scientists even recently discovered the lodge of a secret society. The secret society was a group of engineering specialists called agrimensors. They used extremely sophisticated measuring tools as part of their craft, a secret which was well guarded and made them wildly important. They held meetings in a structure named the House of Orion. According to researchers with the Great Pompeii Project, an initiative to restore the ancient city, they found images of the society's special tools on the floor, specifically a tool called a groma, which was originally developed in Egypt and then used by Greek and Roman surveyors. These agrimensors most likely operated out of the House of Orion, kind of like a primitive version of the Freemasons. They held sacred their measuring principles and safeguarded the knowledge of the builders going back millennia. They quite literally had the power to make or break a city. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite mysterious land from ancient history? Let us all know in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!